Hi, this is Stan Lyle with Master Math. During the lesson, you're going to come to some You Try It slides where you're asked to do problems that relate to the lesson. Hit your pause button, try the problem, and then hit the forward key to move on to the answer. I hope you have a really good time today. Today we're talking about systems of linear equations. And there's some complicated stuff here, so I've divided it up into two lessons. This is part one, and there's a part two that gets more into word problems. And you're really going to need to do both to get a grasp on this subject. But we'll start out kind of easy. Systems of linear equations. Well, that doesn't mean anything very special. It just means more than one linear equation. I've got a system of linear equations there, and I've got a system of linear equations there. But there's some difference between these two systems. In the first one I highlighted, I've got four variables, and none of them are the same. I've got an x, a y, a b, and a c. In the second system of linear equations, though, the variables are the same between the two equations. And if the variables are the same between the two equations, then I may be able to solve for x, or I may be able to solve for y. And I'm going to show you how. Let's pretend that you're an alien. You just landed on the Earth from a far-off planet. You know nothing about the culture. You know nothing about anything here. And you run into a man, and this man just happens to be a mathematician. And you ask the man, well, tell me all about your culture. I mean, what's it like? Do you have a monetary system? Do you have money that you use to exchange for goods and services? And the mathematician says, well, sure we do. And you, the alien, says, well, tell me about it. Well, the mathematician pulls out two coins that were in his pocket, and one's the one on the left, and one's the one on the right. Now, you, the earthling, probably understand that the one on the left is a quarter, and the one on the right is a dime, but you, the alien, really don't know anything about these coins. And you say, well, what are these worth? Well, the mathematician, who's a smart son of a gun, says, or thinks to himself, I'm going to find out how smart these aliens are. I'm not just going to tell him the answer. I'm going to give him a quiz. So the mathematician says, all right, we're going to call that a Q, and we're going to call the one on the right a D. And I'll tell you this much. A Q plus a D equals 0.35. And a Q plus two Ds equals 0.45. All right, alien, let's see how smart you are. You tell me what that Q's worth, and you tell me what that D's worth. Well, anybody who could fly from another planet to the Earth has come from a society whose math has evolved probably well beyond ours, and you didn't have any trouble with this problem. And I'll show you how you did it. First thing you said was, well, I've got two equations here. It's a system of linear equations, and the first equation is Q plus D equals 0.35. Q plus D equals 0.35. I'm going to solve that for Q, so I know what Q equals, and then I'm going to substitute that Q into the second equation, and then I can solve the second equation for D, because my solution for Q that I'm going to put in there doesn't have any Q's in it. It has a D in it, though. So when I substitute for that Q, I'm just going to have D's, and I can solve. So the alien first wants to get rid of that plus D, so he subtracts D from both sides of the equation, and then he's got Q equals 35 minus D. Well, now, he knows that Q equals 35 minus D, and his second expression says Q plus 2D equals 0.45. Well, if Q equals 35 minus D, then I can substitute 35 minus D for that Q. It's exactly equal to that Q, so if I put in something that's exactly equal to Q, I haven't changed the equation. It's still going to be an equality. So that's what he does. He substitutes 0.35 minus D for Q, and then he carries down the rest of the expression. Plus D equals 0.45. Now he solved. He's got 0.35 plus d, because he combined the plus 2d and the minus d, and that became just d, and that equals 0.45. Now he knows that 0.35 plus d equals 0.45. He needs to get rid of that 0.35, so he subtracts 0.35 from both sides of the equation, and he determines that d equals 0.1. Well, you, the human, knew that. A dime, a d, is worth 10 cents, or 0.1 of a dollar. Well, then the mathematician earthling says, all right, you're pretty smart. Tell me what the q is worth. Could he do that? Sure he could. He goes up to the first equation, which is q plus d equals 0.35, and he writes that down. Q plus d equals 0.35. But he knows that d equals 0.1, so he substitutes 0.1 for d. Now he's got q plus 0.1 equals 0.35. He needs to get rid of that plus 0.1, so he subtracts 0.1 from both sides of the equation, and he's got q equals 0.35 minus 0.1. And 0.35 minus 0.1 is 0.25. And q, a quarter, equals $0.25. Well, the mathematician has to acknowledge that this alien's a pretty smart cookie, but he wants to test him a little bit further. So he says to the alien, all right, you solved that one, but there's another way to solve this problem. Do you know how to do it the other way? Well, again, you're a smart alien, so you do know how to do it another way. You say, I've got two equations. If I solved each of those for q, then I could set my two solutions equal to each other, and I could solve for d. How'd you do that? Well, here's how you did it. You took the first equation, which I put in orange, and you solved it for q. You did that by getting rid of the plus d on both sides of the equation, and you're left with q equals 0.35 minus d. And then you took the blue equation, q plus 2d equals 0.45, and you solved that for q. And you concluded that q also equals 0.45 minus 2d. Well, now you know that q equals q, so you know that 0.35 minus d has to equal 0.45 minus 2d. So if you set those two equal to each other, which I've done right there, then you can solve for d, because there's no q's in this expression, there's only one variable, so you can solve for that variable. And when you get done manipulating the equation, you discover that d equals 0.1. Well, the mathematician's really impressed, because this guy knows his algebra, and your teachers and parents are going to be really impressed when you show them you know how to do this too. Try this one. Hit the pause button, do the problem, hit the forward key to move on to the answer. All right, I've got a system of equations here. X plus 4 equals y, and 3x equals y plus 18. And you remember there are two ways we could solve this. We could solve each equation for one of the variables, or either of the variables, it doesn't matter, but solve both of them for the same variable and set those solutions equal to each other. Well, the second method is to find out what one of the variables equals in one of the equations and substitute that value into the second equation and solve. And we already know that y equals x plus 4, so I think that second method is going to be a little bit easier. Let's substitute x plus 4 for that y in the second equation and solve it. I've got 3x equals y plus 18, and I'm going to substitute x plus 4 for y. Then I'm just going to solve the equation. And I end up with x equals 11. We've got 3x minus 2 equals y, and a second equation, 2x plus 4 equals 2y. Well, we know that y equals 3x minus 2. So in the second equation, where we've got a y, we can substitute that 3x minus 2, which I've done right there. I just took that y and replaced it with 3x minus 2. So now it reads 2x plus 4 equals 2 times the expression 3x minus 2. Now I'm going to simplify a little bit. I'm going to multiply 2 times 3x and get 6x. I'm going to multiply 2 times negative 2 and get negative 4. Now I need to get rid of that 2x on the left side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides of the equation. And I'm going to end up with 4 equals 4x minus 4. Now, I need to get rid of this minus 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides of the equation. And that becomes 8 equals 4x. Now, I need to get rid of that 4. So I'm going to divide both sides of the equation by 4. And I end up with x equals 2. Now you try this one. Hit the pause button, do the problem, and then hit the forward key to move on to the answer. Okay, I've got a set of equations here and I want to solve them. I've got 4b plus 16 equals 8c and 2b plus 6 equals 2c. Well, this time let's find out what c equals in both equations, and then we'll set those two equal to each other and solve for b. Well, first let's take the Brown equation. 4b plus 16 equals 8c. I want to get rid of that 8, so I isolate the c. So I'm going to divide the left side and the right side by 0.8, or excuse me, by 8. On the right side, I've got 8c divided by 8, which is c. On the left side, I've got 4b divided by 8, which is a half a b, or 0.5b. And I got plus 16 divided by 8, which is 2. So I know that c equals 0.5b plus 2. Now let's try the green equation. 2b plus 6 equals 2c. And again, we're going to try to find out what c equals in this equation. So I got to get rid of that 2 times c. So I divide both sides of the equation by 2. When I do that, I've got c on the right, and I've got 2b divided by 2, or b, plus 6 divided by 2, or 3. Well, now I know that c equals that, and c also equals that. And I know that c equals c, so this has to equal that. So I set it up that way. I've got this, and I set it equal to that. And then I just solve for b. First thing I got to do is get rid of this 5b, because I want all my b's on one side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 5b from both sides of the equation. And that's going to leave just 2 on the left side of the equation. And on the right, I've got b minus 0.5b, which is 0.5b plus 3. Now, I got to get rid of that plus 3, so I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides of the equation. And I end up with minus 1 equals 0.5b. Now, if minus 1 equals a half a b, then I got to multiply a half a b by 2 to get up to a full b. And I'd have to multiply the left side, the minus 1, by 2 to get up to the value of the full b. So b equals minus 2. Well, that's the end of part 1 of solving systems of linear equations. You're going to want to go to the mastermath.info website and download the Solving Systems of Linear Equations Part 1 worksheet and try that one. When you get comfortable with it, come back to the lessons and listen to Solving Systems of Linear Equations Part 2. We hope you come back real soon. We've enjoyed having you here. Good luck with your math.